Chinese tourists are gone, hotels are empty, the economy is in trouble. Usually this is bad news, but in Japan right now something strange is happening. The locals are smiling, they are saying, finally our city is back. Today let's look at what is really happening in Nara and Hakone and what this means for your next trip to Japan. Here is the context. According to recent news, the number of Chinese tourists in major spots like Nara and Hakone has dropped significantly due to travel restriction by CCP. Business that relied on the mass group are crying, but the gap they left is being filled by a different group, Japanese locals. I analyzed the comments on this news video. The top comments are not complaining about the economy, they are celebrating the atmosphere. Before we move on to the interesting comments, let me first summarize what was conveyed in this video. Here is the economic reality. Anticipating a massive return of Chinese tourists, cities like Nara and had a hotel construction rush. They built thousands of new rooms, specifically targeting wealthy tour groups. But the group didn't come. For years, Japanese people couldn't afford to stay in their own tourist spots because prices were inbound quality. But this year is different. The bubble has burst. Japanese families are finally reclaiming their holiday tradition at affordable prices. A tourist from Singapore also commented, "It doesn't feel that crowded today." With the decline in Chinese tourists, local tourist spots have started promoting a quiet Nara. This quiet Nara, quiet atmosphere heals the heart of the visitors, offering a wonderful tourism experience unique to Nara. Next, let's look at Hakone. Accessible in just 90 minutes from central Tokyo. Here too, we are seeing a decrease in Chinese tourists and an increase in Japanese visitors. Japanese locals who previously stayed away due to the crowd are now returning. It seems the impact is minimal here, especially since Hakone had a low dependency on Chinese tourism to begin with. A young Japanese female answered, "I heard Chinese tourists were noisy at tourist spot, but I felt there wasn't actually much Chinese being spoken." A young couple mentioned that they thought booking a ryokan in Hakone would be difficult due to over-tourism, but they were actually able to find a vacancy immediately and stay. Here, Fuji TV explained the difference between Hakone and Nara. Chinese visitors account for 31.9% of all foreign overnight guests, indicating a heavy reliance on Chinese tourism. On the other hand, the data shows that Hakone's dependency on Chinese tourists is only around 10%, so there is no impact. Ms. Takeuchi, a hot spring inn owner, also answered that the current reality is that there is almost no impact from the issue regarding Chinese tourists. This ryokan is very famous for its bacon egg burger made with renowned Wagyu beef. Since guests from various countries, including Japanese locals, come to stay specifically for this, there is no problem. In this way, while there were vacancies caused mainly by cancellation from Chinese group tour, the reality in Japan is that this gap is being filled by Japanese locals and other international travelers. In Nara, businesses are changing their strategy due to the decrease in Chinese tourists. For example, a manager of a restaurant that previously focused on Wagyu beef said he's switching to raw food. He explained that while Chinese tourists generally do not like raw food, dishes like sashimi are delicious and very popular with other tourists, so he is shifting his menu accordingly. Thank you for waiting, guys. From here, I'd like to dig deeper by picking up the reaction from both Japanese people and overseas viewers regarding this video. The first comment with over 3,000 likes says, "This kind of quiet Japan is just fine. a heated debate has erupted. For example, in response to the claim that store and restaurant owners actually look happy because they can finally rest. There are people commenting in Chinese predicting that the economy will crash and business will be forced to close. In short, many comments argue that this economic hardship is an intentional move by Chinese Communist Party to punish and devalue Japan, and that this argument continues back and forth over many long threads. Let me share my perspective on this. Chinese business have deeply penetrated these tourist areas, creating a closed loop. Tourists arrive on Chinese airline, use Chinese-run taxi services, stay in Chinese-owned hotels, buy gifts at Chinese souvenir shops, and fly home. While I think some money drop in Japanese restaurants or hotels for meals, the vast majority of circulates strictly within the Chinese economic sphere. Therefore, it is said that the real economic impact on Japan is actually minimal. Some think tank calculated the downside of 2 trillion yen, but in reality, the actual loss likely doesn't amount to anything near that. The ironic truth I wanted to convey is that there isn't actually much negative impact on Japan itself. The next comment, which receives 1,470 likes, says, "I'm glad the scenery has been restored." Let me dig deeper into this as well. The word keikan, scenery or landscape, carries many implied meanings here. Of course, it refers to the physical view, but I believe it also encompasses the atmosphere, which was marred by the intolerable behavior of bad-mannered tourists, such as masking messes or causing public nuisances. Furthermore, there is the issue of vandalism, such as graffiti on famous tourist sites. Japanese people receive these acts as polluting the sceneries. Therefore, I believe the comment saying the scenery has been restored is summarizing all of these factors, expressing its belief that the overall appearance, odor, and beauty of the area have improved significantly. The third comment is a sarcastic one. The Beijing government, the Chinese Communist Party, is cooperating with countermeasures against over-tourism. This comment is ironically pointing out that tourist spots were suffering from over-tourism, with skyrocketing hotel prices and increasing litter, creating a situation that was unbearable for Japanese locals. Chinese group tourists were seen as the primary cause of this problem. So by instructing its citizens not to travel to Japan, the Chinese Communist Party has inadvertently helped alleviate or even resolve the issue. One commentator writing in Chinese, so presumably a Chinese national, expressed anger, asking the Prime Minister Takaichi, the current female Prime Minister who hailed from Nara, make rude remark toward China. The reply to this third comment have spiraled into an overheated debate. The argument escalated from a reply asking, "Can you tell us what exactly was rude?" to a debate about the specific content of that remark. Her suggestion that if China attacks Taiwan, Japan might intervene to ensure that Taiwan Strait is not blockaded. In short, what troubles the Chinese Communist Party the most is that while Japan previously did not push back, Prime Minister Takaichi now clearly voicing things that were previously left unsaid. This exchange demonstrates that for the CCP and its supporters, this shift in stance is unforgivable. This explains despite being in office for less than 3 months, she maintained a high approval rating over 75%. Her support is particularly high among the SNS survey generation. I was especially surprised to find that the younger generation, those in their teens, and 20s views the future as bright, with Takaichi-san in power, giving her an approval rating currently exceeding 90%. I consider this to be truly astonishing. Here's the fifth interesting comment. Why do they use such negative phrasing? They should just say that it has become easier for Japanese people to visit, or that it's more relaxing now. In this comment, they refer to the mass media. There is a prevailing perception among SNS users that the old media, television and newspaper, report with a bias. Specifically, media companies are terrifying of backlash from China, so they are extremely cautious and unable to speak freely when reporting on Chinese Communist Party. On the other hand, since there is no retaliation, when they criticize Japan or Japanese politician, the mass media tended to be weak toward China, but aggressive towards Japan. Japanese viewers are accurately aware of this double standard, which is why the comment was phrased in that way. To add context to this fifth comment, the replies pointed out that shops in Nara closing at 5 p.m. isn't due to the decrease in Chinese tourists. Rather, 5 p.m. is the standard closing time. People are noting that temples, shrines generally close at 5 p.m. anyway. In short, the argument in this thread is that it is misleading to cite these hours to claim that the economy is suffering because the Chinese tourists are gone. Here is the final comment I will feature. Why do they report this in such a negatively roundabout way? This is actually a really good thing. We should absolutely stop building an economy that depends on the whims of a single nation. I also strongly agree with this opinion. After all, if we depend on a foreign nation, we risk being used as a bargaining chip, just as we are seeing with China now, leaving us unable to push back when relations sour. Previous Japanese administration never took a strong stand against China, so these issues were often seen as just the tips of the iceberg. However, this time, President Xi Jinping is employing every method of retaliation to demean Japan and force us to admit we are in trouble. Yet in reality, this has only accelerated the move toward reducing our economic dependence. This is leading to a severance of economic ties between Japan and China. I believe the coupling has now effectively become inevitable. Personally, I view this as a very dangerous situation. Economic ties may have prevented military conflict in the past, but with military tensions rising over Taiwan, we are in a precarious position. We must absolutely avoid war in the current climate, and I hope we can steer clear of it. However, simply adhering to China's harassment, as we did in the past, was wrong. To build a future based on equality rather than a hierarchy, we must establish diplomatic relations as equals. Failing to do so would lead to grave mistakes. Therefore, I support the Takaichi administration for working to build such a relationship. I believe that Chinese Communist Party will continue this aggressive stance toward Japan, and I intended to keep watching the situation closely. What do you all think? Alright, let's move on to the final summary. I think this was a very interesting video with some fascinating comments. While we can only read the preface in Japanese, as Japanese people concerned about our country's situation, we can start to see, even if it is just speculation, the deeper reason behind why these comments are appearing. Moving forward, the Chinese Communist Party, facing a tough economic situation, will likely continue to create an external enemy, Japan, to attack. By doing so, they aim to mask internal conflict and divert energy outwards. This trend will likely continue for some time, and I am personally very interested to see where the landing point will be. What I found most different this time compared to 2012 during the Democratic Party of Japan (DPJ) administration back then, when Japan declared the nationalization of Senkaku Islands, the Chinese government applied massive pressure regarding the detained Chinese fishing boat captain. Anti-Japan demonstrations erupted in over 100 cities across China. The DPJ Prime Minister at that time yielded to that pressure, fearing China's movement, and ended up releasing the captain. Because the Chinese Communist Party had that success experience, they assumed that in 2025, if they apply similar pressure, the Japanese administration would fold and Japan would apologize again. However, unlike in 2012, there are now many Chinese people who have visited Japan and value that connection. Also, there is a factor of information, access to world affairs, and the reality of Japan's situation. With more Chinese people having experienced Japan firsthand, especially among the young generation, anti-Japan sentiment isn't as strong. It is very interesting that the anti-Japan activity didn't materialize as the CCP expected. In particular, I don't think Japan is the only one struggling with this pressure from Chinese Communist Party. It's happening in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, of course the EU, like in Germany. Relations are deteriorating in places with strong ties to China, precisely because the pressure from China is intensifying. What we must do is clearly state what is wrong and correct it. Furthermore, we need to partner with other countries facing the same issue to curb the reckless behavior of Chinese Communist Party. I believe this is extremely important. What do you all think? I'm sure there are many of you who are more knowledgeable than I am, so please leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit like the button, and see you next time. This is Ryoma.